So, hey everyone, I'm back from Star Trek Las Vegas, and this is my con report. It's our seventh journey out to Las Vegas to the Rio to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Star Trek. And, we usually arrive on the Tuesday, go from Tuesday to the following Monday, and stay the whole week. Um, Most years they usually sell day passes, but this year the convention actually sold out, and you had to have like a full weekend package, which of course we did. Um, they said a lot of people they sold a lot of gold, captain's chair, and copper packages. I usually end up getting general admission because um, gold comes with a lot of perks, but it also, at least for me anyway, I found that, with general admission, I can usually get everything I need or most of what I need as long as I just plan well. But hopefully, quick overview. We'll go over the highlights and tell you a little bit about the trip. Um, so we got there on Tuesday afternoon. We flew first class, which we've never done before, but my partner wanted to do it because he honestly never done it before, neither had I. So we kind of figured, let's give it a shot because we've never done that. The flight was really nice. It's probably the first time I think I've ever just been very chill about a flight. Because unlike the economy seats where there's three people crammed into a row, the same space in the first class, you have two people. It's a much larger, more comfortable seat with a little bit more space. So it was really comfortable to wait. Of course, you get on first, you get off first, and you get a really nice meal about an hour into the flight. Um, I had the steak on the way down, and I think on the way back, I thought I had pre-ordered a meal, but apparently it didn't take or something. And anyway, I ended up having the souffle pancakes on the return trip, both of which were really delicious. You get a nice meal with like an entree, a side, and like a little dessert or something, and it was really fantastic. I mean, it's a more expensive ticket, obviously, but you get what you pay for, especially in this particular case. We arrived, I think, sometime in early afternoon, in part, of course, because flying from Central to, I guess, whatever Vegas is, Pacific Mountain. I think I don't know. Anyway, we got there about 2-ish. Got settled in the hotel, which is the Rio All Suites. It's probably one of the hotels. I mean, I know that the very first time, well, not the very first time, but after we had been to the Rio a couple of times, when we went back, maybe like the third or fourth year, I just kind of breathed a sigh of relief when I came into the building, and it was just like, it's probably one of those hotels that, we kind of refer to as our home away from home because it's really just, one of those places that's just soul restoring to be for, at least for us, for the Star Trek convention. And after we got settled, I had to go get water for my CPAP machine, which I've been using for the past little under a year, I guess. I knew there was a CVS or something not too far from the hotel, so we took a walk. And apparently in Vegas it was 117 degrees that day, so it was quite warm. We kind of needed to cool down once we got into the CVS and then take our walk back to the hotel. It was really the only time during the day anyway that we left the building. Previous years I've kind of joked about that we really don't leave the hotel because for the most part you don't need to. Um, there's plenty of food options inside and there's plenty to do. We're there for a Star Trek convention, not necessarily for sightseeing, so we're not walking all over the strip. Um, but the thing about Tuesday, of course, is that Tuesday is the preview night. So we had dinner at Luckley's Bar and Grill, which is one of the centrally located restaurants in the hotel. I forget exactly what I had. I know we split a slice of cheesecake, and we went to the what they call the preview night, where you can pre-register and you can get a chance to look around the dealer's room. I always use this night for two things: to purchase photos, 8x10 glossies of the Star Trek characters I know I want to get autographed, or at least as many as possible. I think I didn't get them all, but I got quite a few. I went over my calculated budget for that. Actually, I bought enough that it was funny because the person doing the ringing up, is like he actually had to do some math because I joked, we don't even have a number for that because I had like 35 pictures and I think the chart he had only went up to 20. So And the other thing I do when I go into the deals room on Thursday night is to look around and see where everybody's table is, because it helps me save time to know when I come in looking for autographs, where do I need to go in the room. And for the most part, also I should say that if you've never been to Star Trek Las Vegas, some people are there for certain days, and sometimes tables will move. But at the very least, it generally, some people tend to be in the same spots, and it behooves you to take a look around. Wednesday, the first official day of the con, my partner and I did a few photo ops. I went and did some autographs. A couple that I probably had a feeling would be at their tables. So I got, let's see, I got Von Armstrong, Todd Stashwick, and let's see, who else did I get that first day? Um, let's see. Oh yes, Max Grodenchik. Because we hadn't done him before, so he was our first photo op. Um, for the most part, Wednesday was a pretty casual day. It was busier than usual because I think everybody was here. Everybody was here for like a week past, so I think you noticed a greater earlier flow. Typically, or at least last year anyway, it seemed like Wednesday and Thursday kind of ramped up to the busiest day, which is always Saturday. Saturday always has the most guests, the most photo ops, and the most complicated schedule. So Saturday is usually the heavy day. Um, but Wednesday was a pretty low key day. We were trying to get some ramen, but apparently the ramen place wasn't open during the week. I think it was open like Friday or something when we finally got a chance to eat there. But we had a lot of good meals. Thursday, my partner was doing dialysis, so I was on my own on Thursday. Having tried last year, having had dealt with it last year, I kind of knew that it was going to more or less eat up the entire day. So I kind of planned on just doing solo stuff. So I was able to, because I had like a couple of photo ops and a lot of them were grouped close together, so I had a chance to take in some panels on Thursday. I was in a Gates McFadden panel. There was a panel with Terry Farrell and Nicole DeBoer, and third panel later that day with Denise Crosby, Michael Dorn, and John Delancey. So it was all interesting stuff. I really enjoyed it. A lot of times I don't have time to just sit and enjoy a panel, so it was kind of nice to be able to get to do that at least a couple of times over the weekend. Um, I usually schedule like 36 photo ops for us collectively, both together and separate, which usually tends to be quite a fair bit. I'm contemplating scaling back a little bit to give myself a little more free time, and also at least for a lot of the years up to now, I've been hunting a lot of autographs, and of course, at least for 2017 to recently, there's been new Star Trek shows, so there's been new autographs to collect, and also new things, new focuses that have hit my attention. You know, I got like 20 autographs this time around. I was thinking about trying to do like an Enterprise cast shot. Right now I don't think Jolene Blaylock even does conventions, but that being said, there was a couple of factors, that part of which was one that was that I already knew I had about 20 autographs that I was hunting for, and I was just like, trying to hunt for a few more is probably going to be a little bit crazy, not to mention potentially price prohibitively expensive. So I was just like, okay, yeah, yeah. I just called it at where I was. Um, you know, we had a couple of cancellations. A couple of guests had to cancel for one reason or another, which I suppose it all ultimately worked out. There was one or two of them that I particularly would have liked to see, but goodness willing, we will have that opportunity in the future. Most notably was Colin Meaney, who of course was supposed to come last year, but both last year and this year, I believe he had work obligations, which was unfortunate, but to be expected, particularly at con that ends up having almost 200 guests. They had, I think, a record number of 198, so they almost broke 200. But typically, I think their average number is somewhere more along the lines of 150 to 160, which usually is still quite a large amount of guests. Um, that being said, it's kind of the fun of Star Trek Las Vegas, because every year it's a grab bag. You never know exactly how many guests you're going to have, or who's going to be there. For the most part, as long as there isn't a pandemic going on, typically you don't have that many cancellations. Of course, you expect a few because things come up. These are working actors, a lot of them, and some of them have obligations. Um, Also, Thursday, I did a photo op with Garrett Wong, and at the time I wanted to tell him a joke that I'd come up with last year. Unfortunately, at the time it just didn't seem like the right moment, so I kind of waited a little bit after the photo op to see if he would walk by. And I ultimately he got into a conversation with the photographer, so I decided, you know what, I'll just wait and see him at his table a little while later. So I did catch him at his table, and this was a joke that had actually occurred to me the year before, but by the time I actually had the courage to go and try and tell it to him, it was already the end of the convention. So I just kind of held on to it. But I went up to his table, and I told him the joke, and I said, I've come to tell you a Harry Kim joke. Why are the Harry Kim action figures never on sale? Because they're not part of the promotion. So he laughed, and he said he'd never heard it before, which pleased me because I was just glad that he enjoyed it. And I kind of hope that he remembers and shares it later. But also, Thursday night is usually our fancy dinner. If you've watched any of my previous con reports on Star Trek Las Vegas, you know that we always go to a celebrity restaurant on Thursday night. One that's kind of like a highlight of the convention. Both, kind of as a start to the convention, and also, just a rare opportunity because Vegas has so many celebrity restaurants, food and meals that you'll never find anywhere else. And it's probably the only time that we really go to restaurants of that level because you just Vegas attracts like celebrity restaurant concepts and really interesting food, and every meal there is worth taking a picture of. I always take my camera to those restaurants just because the food is literally art on a plate. So, it was absolutely fantastic meal. It was the MGM Grand, which was a casino we'd never been to before. So I kind of had to wander around and find my way in. I looked at a floor map, but it took me a while to kind of navigate exactly where in the building Morimoto's was located. But it was definitely spectacular. It's like, I don't know if it was the best meal I've ever had in Vegas, but it was definitely a really good one. I had some sort of pork bao bun and a short rib for the main course and some sort of orange souffle cheesecake, I think, for dessert. And probably flash some pictures of it up when I edit all this together. Um, let's see. On Friday, I got most of the lower deckers autographs. I got Don Lewis, Noel Wells, Eugene Cordero, and Tawny Newsome on Friday, and I think they were all I was able to get. I was going to try and get Kareem Diane, but I think I had other scheduling obligations because Alexander Siddig had been moved to a different time. I think it was. I don't know. I might be mixing up my days. Um, oh yeah, no wait, I'm talking about Friday. Okay, yeah, Friday Alexander Siddig had been moved to 4:30 instead of like 2 something, probably to accommodate his panels and photo ops. But anyway, I got a bunch of the lower decker autographs, which I had some pictures which had all 4 of their characters on it, which is what I was kind of hoping for. Um, if you've ever tried to collect like a cast shot of autographs, you know how complex it is because I mean usually these casts have large groups of people, and I mean you never know. It's like last year I successfully was able to get the Voyager cast, but sometimes like Jerry Ryan's autograph was a little light because the pens that she was using were dying or something. I'm not sure, but I mean it's still a nice looking autograph, but it's not as nice as I would have liked it to be. But that being said, it was it's a lot of work to try and collect these. So but I wanted to. I knew this year I wanted to try and do Lower Decks and Academy because most of them were going to be there, except of course for Carice Brooks. Oddly enough, the group photos they did have, they didn't have the promotional material because I was kind of hoping for the promotional shot with all 6 of them together. But they had a nice one of them walking, which had like 5 of the 6. So I got that collectively signed. And Friday, I'll also mention, aside from doing a fair good amount of photo ops, we had, let's see, I was getting on George Takei's line. I think I was the second to last person. Fortunately, apparently, I guess they had mentioned that they had intended to sell only 250, and they ended up selling 280. Now, I'm not sure if that's because the website didn't turn it off soon enough, or whatever the case may have been. But needless to say, I was able to get a George Takei autograph. It wasn't personalized, but that was all right. I was just glad to have gotten it. Um, because I so far hadn't gotten his autograph, and particularly since I knew originally anyway, he and Walter were both going to be there. I wanted to try and get a photo op with them together and get George's autograph while I still had the opportunity. Unfortunately, Walter Koenig had to cancel. I believe maybe for health issues. I'm not sure. But that being said, it was George was still able to make it. And of course, once I was finished with George Takei, I got on Alexander Stig's line, which took a while longer than expected. You never know with autographs because, as I'll say, later, it's like this. Alexander Stig had a long autograph line, not the least of which because he hadn't made it in quite a long time. I think the last time I had seen him at Star Trek Las Vegas was 2018, so this had been like 8 years that he hadn't been there. But he was going to be there this year just for the Friday. So, he had a long autograph line. I got on his line after waiting through, I think, a panel or two. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was like, I knew it was going to be late. But after I finished with Takei, I went on to Sadig's line, Alexander Sadig's line. And, eventually they closed the ballroom and they moved us to the photo room B, where I kind of just stayed on until I finished because apparently somebody had overheard that he didn't want to disappoint any of the fans that had come to see him. Which, I mean, I'm sure most of them do. I think most of them kind of stick around at least until the line is done. And, I appreciated that. It's like I'd always I wanted to see him because he was one of the few Deep Space Nine actors that we hadn't had the opportunity to meet, with, of course, Rene Auberjonois unfortunately passed away in 2019 and Avery Brooks retiring, which kind of precluded the possibility of us meeting the two of them. But that being said, I still wanted to meet Alexander Siddig, so we got that done this year. Um, on Saturday, I had to miss Scott Bakula's photo op because, the way the schedule was, I originally thought I had about an hour between one photo op and the next. And, Scott was a little late in arriving, which pushed the Enterprise lead's photo op until after its time slot. And then that pushed the extended Enterprise Extended Universe photo op after that, and then the solo photo ops for which, of course, Scott Bakula had a long line. And I was able to get the Enterprise leads in Linda Park, but when I went back to where Scott Bakula, I just ran out of time. I could have tried to mention something to the staff, I suppose, but I just was concerned about time, so I just went on to the Academy kids because I knew I had like a bunch of them in a row in the other photo room, so I went to go do that. So, I mean, unfortunately, I missed a solo Scott Bakula photo op, but hopefully I'll get another opportunity in the past. That being said, I did manage to get just about everything else that I went for, which was, really pretty good. Um, let's see. But I had, let's see, I think I'd gotten that morning, I'd gotten Sandro Rosta and I'd gotten Jack Quaid in the morning. And in the afternoon, I was going to try and get as many of the cadets as I could because I knew they were going to be there Saturday and Sunday. But somehow, and I guess Saturday afternoon, I just happened to luck out because a lot of their lines were short or not. In some cases, I don't think they even, a couple of them didn't necessarily have like a super long line. But I was able to get George Hawkins, Bella Shepherd, Zoe Steiner, Kareem Diane, um, and Jillian Vigman, and oh yes, Gina Yeshere, all in the span of like an hour and change, which really was kind of surprising. But I mean, it's happened before. It's like if you time it right and you're in just the right place, at the right time. It's like I was able to get, I've been able to do that in the past, get 6 autographs in an hour. So it's always nice when it works out that way. Um, the last thing of note, I guess, for Saturday was that they had the Enterprise 25th anniversary party, which occurred at 5-ish or something. Took a while for them to let us in, and I initially kind of thought it was going to be just like a hangout and talk kind of situation. But they also had some music from the Star Trek Rat Pack, which had Vaughn Armstrong, Steve Rankin, a woman whose name I don't remember, and Casey Biggs, and they did some of their songs to entertain the crowd. We listened to it for a couple of songs, had some food to hold us over until dinner time, and then just kind of hung around a little bit. Ultimately, we decided not to stick around too terribly long just because it was kind of difficult scenario to have a little conversation in, and also, I was going to have better and other opportunities to speak to the actors, so it's just like, let's just head off early. Um, Sunday was pretty mellow. A lot of the lines were really short. I guess people must leave on Sunday to get back to work on Monday or something. But Sunday, it was. pretty light. I only had one autograph I had to get on Sunday because I got most of them on the previous days. So it was nice that I knew I only had to get Fred Tatasciore. I had to come back for him because I went on his line for about an hour and I ran out of time. So I came back a couple hours later and was able to get through his line in probably 30 to 45 minutes the second time. But he was a very friendly man. It was nice to get a chance to meet him, and it was great to talk to him for a few minutes. Early that morning, to start Sunday morning, I was able to sit in on a Starfleet Academy panel, which had all six of the cadets, or well, the six of the cadets that were there. It had Sandro, Bella, Zoe, Kareem, George, and Romeo, who plays Akam Sadal, and of course Gina Yashere and Robert Picardo came in a little late. I think he was just delayed. But they talked for a little while. It was a good panel. They from what I have heard, they are looking into the possibility of trying to continue the story somehow. I don't know exactly any details at this point, but I do know that there is interest in them finishing the story one way or another. I kind of hope that at the very least that we get some novels out of the Starfleet Academy series, that we get some comics. I know there's some already, but I want more just because I really would have liked to see that show resolve its 4 season arc. It was a great show. I really, whatever your feelings about it might be, it really helped me. It really has helped me and helped my mental and emotional state this year. It's exactly the kind of show I need right now, and it's also it's meant a lot to me. And I've watched the first season already at least a couple of times. The pilot I've seen probably like 5 or 6 times at this point. We watched the pilot again on Saturday evening because, it's always fun and a little mind blowing to me and a little surreal to watch an episode when you've met some of the actors hours before or are going to meet them the next day or something. And it's always kind of weird because, it's one of the reasons why I always remember the Star Trek Strange New Worlds musical episode because it released while we were at the convention and it was during the writer's strike, so they couldn't actually mention Star Trek. But the following day, I was able to talk to Celia Rose Gooding about the musical episode and tell her how much I liked it. So that was really a lot of fun. And after having met the Academy kids, I kind of wanted to watch the pilot again, even though I'd seen it like a couple weeks before. So we watched it again, and it was really fun. And I guess the last thing is that although we had been trying to meet up with some friends of ours for most of the convention because it's so busy, I didn't actually connect with them until Sunday afternoon. Kinsey and Tracy, who had participated in the costume contest, the cosplay contest. Congratulations, Tracy, on winning the cosplay contest with Jordy Bear and their partner Jared. And we also invited them to dinner. We went to our traditional end of con meal at the Korean barbecue place. So it was. I mean, as always, it was a great convention, a really good trip, and something I always enjoy doing, and I look forward to going back in the future because it definitely is one of my favorite vacations. And this year, out of curiosity, I actually just tracked my expenses just to see how much I spend on it, and I spend a lot of money. But at least on the plus side, having this information also kind of helps me a little to budget for next year. So I'm going to see if that's going to make me change my plans or adjust things a little bit. And I do think I'm going to rearrange the distribution of some of the photo ops a little bit because my partner I think well I obviously prefer to do a lot more photo ops than he does, but I also kind of think that depending on what I would like to get out of the convention going forward, I really enjoy being able to see some of the panels. But I mean, if we have that day where he is unavailable, it's like I might be able to enjoy a lot of panels on that particular day when things are a little bit low key. Also, it just depends, so it's like a lot of things depend, but typically I end up doing like 30 to 36 photo ops and getting somewhere between 14 and 20 autographs, and it really depends. Now, will that always be the case? I don't know, but that being said, the 60th anniversary was really enjoyable. I had a good time, and I think it was a really good vacation, and I look forward to going back in future years. If you like post-apocalyptic fiction, polar bears, and adventure, check out my newest release, Winterfall, available in paperback and ebook on Amazon.